Welcome to East by West Farms. Here we grow what we eat and eat what we grow. Today I'm going to show you what have survived the winter and what have self-started in the garden. In front of me is a patch of blue bonnets. That's the state flower of Texas. When you see it in full bloom like this, that means spring is here. These are wildflowers. We also have lots of things started in the garden. Our goal for the garden is eventually it become a permaculture that we don't need a lot of maintenance. We will slowly transit the garden from annual garden to a permaculture garden. It is encouraged to see that lots of things have survived the winter in the garden. Some other plants also started. That means they can self-seed easily. And that's important for the permaculture garden. In this small patch in front of me, there are quite a few things that can be considered perennial or self-seeded. This is asparagus that I planted from bare roots in winter. This is the first year and it sprouted very well. And of course, it takes maybe 2 or 3 years until we can harvest the asparagus spear in spring, but that's a good start. Hopefully this will last us for quite some time to come. In front of me is blooming is cilantro that is grown from store-bought coriander in the spice section. Every year we got quite a lot of them, and we just let the seeds fall, and then they will sprout when the weather condition is right, usually several weeks before this. It's blooming and it's going to set seed again, so we can continue to harvest them. So very reliable to self-start it every year. This plant is a potato plant. I planted some potato last fall and didn't have time to dig it up, so I just left it in the ground. This year it has been very dry, and maybe that's the reason that the potato didn't rot in the ground. When spring comes, they sprouted and look like we're going to have a second harvest of potato. When you dig them up, if you don't, you just leave a few of them in the ground, then they will continue to come back. That's almost like a perennial in this case. I just noticed that there's a mustard green that sprouted in between the two potato plants. The leaves get chewed up by bugs, but these are very hardy plants, and when the weather condition is right, they will thrive and give you huge bushes. There are so many ways you can cook mustard greens and pickle them. It's really a very nice plant to have, and especially they self-seed so easily, and you can use them as a cover crop. This is a taro roots, kind of similar to potato, that if you don't dig them out in winter or before winter, then they will stay underground through winter and then sprout in the spring. The tuber is edible, kind of like potato. I guess the Westerner will say they're like potato, but they have very different texture. And you can also eat the stem. Don't just cook it, you need to process that, otherwise it gives you some tinkling. But you know how to process it, and they are actually very tasty. Next to the taro roots is pomegranate plants that we grew from seeds 2 years ago. The problem with growing from seeds is you don't know when they will bear fruit. I read somewhere that it can take anywhere between 7 to 15 years for the pomegranate to set fruit. It's a nice plant to have. I like to grow plants from seeds because that's kind of fun. But for pomegranate, I probably will buy a plant or two from the nursery so that I can get pomegranate faster. But this eventually someday it will produce fruit for us. In front of me is a peach tree that we sprouted in spring 2020, and in fall of 2021 we transplanted this in this location. Didn't get flower in spring of 2021, and this year it got 1 or 2 flowers, and I can see actually now it has 2 peaches from those flowers. This is very fast. Essentially in 2 years we got a peach tree that is producing. We only get 2 peaches this year, and hopefully we will be able to enjoy it several months later. But next year I will expect this to have lots of peaches that we can harvest. Right next to the peach tree, I have a few sunflowers that self-started, and they're actually getting pretty big. Next to the sunflower plants, there's also a cherry tomato that self-started. It's actually relatively big already. The cherry tomato seems to be start pretty easily in the ground, and you can see that these are the ones that I started in the greenhouse. You can compare that the ones that self-started in the ground actually is much bigger than the one that started in the greenhouse. This is Shallot, and so I planted last fall. It didn't do much in winter. Now it's come out and it's blooming and setting seeds. So I'm looking forward to collect some of these seeds and start to sprinkle around, and maybe we will get a patch of shallot growing by itself. This tall tree here is an apple tree. It's grown from the seeds of a Fuji apple we bought from Walmart. When we had open up the apple, the seeds was already sprouting inside the apple, probably because of the apple has been stored in the cooler for a while. We just planted the seeds and got this tree over here. I believe this is the second year, and it didn't bloom this year, so we probably will not get any apples. Last year, the deer come and gave it a nice haircut and they ate everything. I'm glad that it actually come back very strong. Hopefully, it will have another strong growth this year, and maybe next year we will get flowers on that, and we'll be curious to see what kind of fruit we get. We actually get quite a few apple trees. This is the biggest one. You can also see that the Taro Roots here and the Cilantro here is also much larger or bigger than the one in the other patch. This area seems to be, for whatever reason, the microclimate is actually very good for things to grow. That's kind of a important things to remember, that to create different microclimate in your garden, so that some plants will grow better in one place than others, and also they make the garden more resilient. I grew these chives here. along the fence to use it as a border because the chives have very strong root system that can keep the weed from getting into the garden. Chive, of course, is perennial. It will not die back, but it doesn't grow much in winter. But now is the time that it starts to growing very strong. It likes the clay soil because these are much stronger than the ones I grown in sandy soil. Around this time, if you don't have a lot of things to harvest from the garden, chive is one of the very reliable things that you can count on in early spring. Give you some leafy green for cooking. Can you believe that this is grown from a bottom of the green onion we bought from Walmart? Turns out that if you let those green onion grow, that's how big they get. This is like a half inch or 1 inch in diameter. Get ready to bloom so I can get seeds. I actually got seeds from last year and grew quite a few of them. So that's a very nice investment if you buy a bunch of green onion from Walmart and ate the top and cut the bottom 1.5 inch and plant in the ground. Then you have a full garden of green onions. Here is a tiny strawberry plant, but it already have 2 fruit already. I didn't know how well the strawberry plant will grow in this native heavy clay, so I just planted one over here. I believe this one was planted 2 years ago, just to see how it goes. It didn't thrive, I would say, but it survived, and I even forgot it until just several days ago and saw it and noticed that it's actually setting fruit. The soil here is not that great, and it will improve with time, and hopefully this will start to have runners and then populate the whole area over here for strawberries. In this area here, there are quite a few plants that sprouted. They are still small, but I can see what they are. This is Shiso. Last year I bought a pack of seeds, but only got like maybe 2 or 3 plants. One was planted over here, and now I got tons of them actually sprouted everywhere. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 over here, 8. I heard that they are invasive, and now I understand why. If you don't collect the seeds, seems to be you will get it themselves sprout easily. I also got some basil. I believe they are the same family, and seems to be the basil also is easy to self-sprout. This is a new garden area, so you can see there's still lots of weeds. Last year, when I was prepared the garden for winter, I just buried some squash seeds because the squashes are very good for condition the soil. Now you can see that this is probably a butternut squash that has sprouted and is growing actually pretty strong. This one, I don't know what kind of squash it is. I start to see some flower buds on there. It's going to be a mystery squash for me. I'm not sure you recognize this plant. This is a peanut plant, and you can see the shells over here. What happened is last year I planted some peanuts from using the peanuts I bought from the store. And then I got quite busy in the fall and didn't dig them up. So I thought they're going to just rot in the ground. This year I saw something sticking out of ground like this. And I was like, what is that? And then I recognized it's a peanut plant. I expect to get more peanuts this year. Either you call it perennial or self-seeded. So that means if we don't clean out all the peanuts, then we would expect every year that this will continue to come back. So this is an avocado tree. I was hoping that I can keep it alive in the greenhouse. Unfortunately, we got quite cold this winter, so the top died off. But fortunately, it looked like the root at the base still alive, and it shoot out a new shoots. Once it's established, actually avocado might be able to survive the winter over here, especially if it's in a greenhouse. In this video, I showed you what have survived the winter in the garden and what self-started in the spring. The idea is that we get enough plants that can survive the winter, and also there's a bunch of vegetables that can self-seed. Then we can transit the garden into a permaculture food forest, and that will require much less maintenance. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumb up. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it down below. If you have not done so, please hit the subscribe button to follow our journey with the East by West farms.